Hello, and welcome to another episode of Improperly Packaged, a show where we unbox topics related to movies, TV, games, whatever, really. And with me here again is Adam. How are you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me back.
Ah, you did such a great job the first time. We thought you'd have you back for another really intense deep dive into some
Yes.
dark material, just like The Last of Us Part 2, right?
Yeah, and it's as if 2020 can't get dark enough. Why not, dive
Yeah.
into something this heavy? So,
A lot of people look to art as a way of
mm,
escapism to get
hmm
out of the stressful circumstances of our country and our world. But,
yes, yeah,
interesting stuff that is troubling and dark
mm,
releases nonetheless. And heck, I'll be darned if they're not as interesting as it can be to talk about. And so
oh yeah, I'm really looking forward to it.
I'm really looking forward to it too. It's going to be extremely interesting. And so a few weeks ago, me and Luke, we did a spoiler
hmm
cast on Tenet, and
Mm,
that movie is mind bending and just wild, and it's crazy. And it was really difficult to talk about just because of
hmm
how intricate it is. I think that movie has met its match in the movie that we're
mm,
reviewing
yeah,
today.
yes,
Um,
yeah. Mind bending is it's an interesting term for it. Yeah, and like when you say mind bending for Tenet, I think of that very differently than mind bending for this movie.
yes,
Like,
this is like
yeah,
heart bending, maybe.
yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's sort of mind bending for me when I think about, and I haven't seen Tenet yet. But thinking of like other Nolan movies, like mind bending is confusion,
Yeah.
for me. But for this, it's sort of like burrowed its way into my brain, where it's this constant thinking over the lines and scenes, and it's just this repetition. But yeah,
Yeah.
there's also that emotional piece too. Heartbending is a good word for it.
So we're gonna go right into it. This is what this
Mhm.
episode's gonna be. It's kind of like a bonus episode. We're just gonna talk about this movie. And so here's the preamble. We are today doing the spoiler cast for the Netflix original movie. I'm thinking of ending things. So
Mhm.
before we get into it, I normally don't do this, but just a little bit of precaution. We are going to be discussing subject matter that is just inherently very dark and very troubling. A lot of it deals with suicide, depression. And so it's just a bit of a warning that if that doesn't sound like something that you'd want to get into, maybe don't watch this movie and don't listen to the spoiler cast. But if you've watched this movie and you want to dive into it with us and just kind of talk about it and break down this piece of art, yes, please jump in with us.
Yes. And I'm glad you gave that warning, because for someone who watched the movie and only saw the trailer and didn't read the book, I didn't know that's what it was going to be about.
Yeah,
So it's sort of, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, that sort of like, oh, the realization, those moments hit really hard. So yeah, pretty
100%.
interesting.
Yeah, even as we were watching the movie,
Hmm
I was like, "Is this what it's about?" Until like it got to the end, and I was like, "Okay." Um,
Yeah.
but let's I guess I'm trying to figure out the best way to talk about this movie, and
hmm
at first, let's just this is kind of pointless. But we're gonna do it nonetheless. Go ahead
hmm
and let's just give our non-spoiler take on this movie. It might that take might last like 30 seconds, but even so, Adam,
hmm
before we get into spoilers, what did you think of I'm Thinking of Ending Things?
I thought it was excellent. I thought it was a really unique portrayal of someone's hurt, someone's pain. Oddly enough, it felt relatable, and not in the sense that like that's the route that I would plan on going or have thought about going or something like that, but relatable in the sense, and I guess this will be explained a little bit more of the thoughts that we have about other people that we're attracted to,
Mm,
the scenes that we might play over and over in our head, or the scenes that we might imagine happening. Like that felt relatable. Of like, oh man, what it would be like to bring this person home to dinner, or have them meet my family, or take them out for ice cream, those sorts of things. Um, so yeah, it was really interesting. I thought it was a great. It was a sad movie. It was a heavy movie. It surprised me. It's one of those. I was trying to think before we started this, like what other movie has a title that it's led you to believe it's about one thing, but it turns out to mean something completely different. I feel like I can only count on like one hand the number of movies that do that through their title, and
Hmm.
this one did that pretty well. Um, and yeah, I didn't read the book, but I have a good friend who did, and I know they took some like different routes and some liberties with the subject material, which I think works a lot better for the movie. Um, but I think it's something that is it's it's art. It's something that should be watched, and that's why I reached out to you. I was like, Jordan,
Yeah.
if you watch this, we have to talk about it because I got to get it out of my head.
I'm really glad that you did. I mean, like, so the experience of watching this movie we'll talk about, but it all changes after when you get to the end. It
Mm-hmm.
changes the entire movie, and that, and it's hard to almost talk about a movie like that as whether or not that's a good thing or bad thing. But in this case, it doesn't really matter. It's this experience that they wanted to take you on, and they really did. And I'm glad that you brought up that like you related to it, because saying that it's like, oh, that's scary, but no, it's like
Yeah.
there's a path that they take you on, which I think most people can relate to, and it's the feeling of
Mm-hmm.
loneliness,
Mm-hmm.
and whether or not you've been able to find something there to pull you out of that, you know, and hopefully you have, is great. But either way, we've been in moments where we felt a certain way, and yeah, just certain aspects of that, like the feeling of longing and the conversation you have of self-worth. I mean, that's
Mm-hmm.
those conversations seem very familiar, and
Yeah.
from certain aspects of my life. But yeah, I've watched this movie maybe 1.5 times. So
Okay.
I watched this in two parts. I
Mm-hmm.
watched it one half one night, and then like the next day when I got back from work, I finished it, and then I mulled over it. I read some stuff, watched a few videos.
Mm-hmm.
Just I think that's a must. By the way, you must. If like if we're that
Sure.
video, great. But
Yeah.
either way,
Yeah.
articles, videos to kind of just dig into stuff, because there's gonna be stuff you miss.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I watched it again, but I didn't watch it. I listened to the movie a second time
Oh.
while I was at work. So Netflix has this really nice thing that a lot
Mm-hmm.
of video players don't have, is that you can actually turn off your phone and the audio can continue, which
Mm.
is great usually for stuff like stand-up comedy. But
Yes. Yes.
but I found use for it for this. This movie is, there's a lot of stuff that happens visually for sure, and so I don't
Mm-hmm.
recommend you listening to the movie for the first time, but just watching it or listening to it again with like the context of the ending was
Mm-hmm.
definitely a new experience, and it was great. And you might be able to do that just through recollection, but sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, that did happen, and then oh yeah, it means a lot more than it did
Mm-hmm.
when I saw it first. But whether or not I recommend this movie, I 100% do, as a piece of art, because it
Mm-hmm.
definitely is a piece of art, and I think when I was first watching it, you know, I was like, this, like, I almost got a feeling of pretension, like, why are you doing, why, just, why am I even watching this? But then at the end, I was like, this is what they're doing.
Mm-hmm.
It is not pretension. It all has a reason. It all has
Mm-hmm.
a purpose, and it all like hits home. And so it's a great piece of art in that sense. I don't know if I'd read the book. It's just something I don't know if I want to spend that much time in.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard some like interesting things, like it may be like have more of a horror feel almost
Yeah,
in the
I've heard the
book.
same.
Yeah, where
Mm-hmm.
the movie I don't get that sense at all. It's not, you know, but either way, yeah, I highly recommend it. And again, if you are struggling with stuff and thoughts of that, I honestly, I don't know if I'd give this movie a watch. This movie
Mm.
is kind of, it's not here to preach at you. It's not
Mm-hmm.
here to give you answers. It's not here to make you feel good. It's a piece of art that's showing you something, and I'm glad that we're able to do that. I'm glad
Yeah.
that Like Netflix is very open to be like, here is this. There's some troubling stuff, but this is a story that's being told. And so if you're not for that life, don't don't.
Yeah.
But if you
Yes.
want, if you feel good about it and you're after that description, you're like, this sounds interesting. Yeah, 100%, because it's challenging.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult. It requires a lot of you, and
Yes.
I think making that investment is worthwhile. Okay, so I thought about it like this. Something I'm interested in before we even get into it. What
Mm-hmm.
was your because this is an interesting thing about your experience watching the movie, not so much your thoughts after the fact, but as
Mm.
you were watching it, like, because it's not something you're going to hear a lot. Like, as you were watching it, before you actually were able to contextualize the things that you were seeing, what were your feelings?
Yeah, yeah. It was like curiosity was, I think, the first well, the first, and even before that, very early in the movie, we get the title line of our female lead and her saying or thinking, I'm thinking of ending things. And like the first moment, I'm like, man, yeah, I've been there. Of like, you're in a relationship with someone for a while, you've got history, you're thinking about ending things, and now it's just really hard because the history's there. It's a difficult conversation that you don't want to have. So like that sort of relating piece was early on, but immediately after that, so the lead, and I say the lead, the female lead, and I'm doing
Yeah.
that on purpose because she does not have a name. Like we checked on IMDb, she's just the woman, I think it's called.
Yeah,
She
young
doesn't have a
woman.
name. Yeah, the young woman. But I think that the relating feeling changed because as soon as she had that thought, I'm thinking of ending things, her boyfriend Jake says, "What did you just say?" And so that caught me off guard.
Yeah, because she
And I'm
did
like,
not say anything.
wait, she did not say that out loud. What is happening
Yeah.
right now? What am I missing? So then I that sort of like hunched in. I'm like looking for things on screen, like, okay,
Yeah.
what's happening? They're just in a car having a conversation, or it's just her pondering out the window. Um, so yeah, I think that curiosity is what I latched on to. And then that curiosity shifted to confusion slash this feeling of eeriness once we get to the next set piece, which
Mm-hmm.
is his childhood home, his parents' house. Um, I think that's sort of the most complex, um, I guess, a set piece for me because the the timeline of events or things that take place in that location don't make sense.
Yeah,
They
it's like
don't.
at that
They're not
point.
linear.
It's at that point where you're like, you kind of realize this movie is definitely not what
Mhm.
I think it is at this
Not
point.
what.
Any
Yes, exactly.
preconceived notions are gone out the window.
Gone.
What is
Yes.
happening?
But I think, and also in the back of my mind, I'm like, okay, this is Charlie Kaufman. I know I'm getting into something weird, like adaptation, being John like Eternal Sunshine, one of my
Mm-hmm.
favorite movies. I know I'm here for the weird. I'm here for the things changing. That I'm not. I'm being confused, but I'm really here for what the characters are going to do and say and act around each other. So knowing that it was him and going into it, I didn't expect it just to be like a simple breakup movie. I expected some oddness or some emotional wreckage in some sort of manner. I think I got that, just not in the way that I was expecting. So yeah, I think my feelings of going through it changed. It was weird. At one point that like eeriness changed to laughter, like audible laughter out loud.
Mm.
Um, and we can get to that like when we talk about the janitor watching the movie, eating dinner.
Uh-huh.
Um, we get to that point, like that whole scene of the movie within a movie, I like laughed out loud, and I wasn't expecting that either. And that sort of changed and then shifted, and we get to the end where it's like, oh man, heaviness and sadness. And so it was
Yeah.
really an emotional ride of ups and downs. But that thread of curiosity and eeriness was in it throughout the whole time.
Yeah, I agree. I'm with you. There was something there that was definitely like leading me on. I was like, what in the world is happening? I hope I get to a point where I understand it. Like that's always the thing where I'm like, what was that? Something would happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, what was that? Or I can grasp at straws as to what things were, but I knew that I wouldn't get any sort of answer for that until the end came. And then even when the end came, I was like, oh, but
Yeah.
it wasn't a oh. Like it was kind
Right.
of like I understood it at a certain level, but I needed to dig a little bit deeper. And but yeah, I mean, throughout the movie, I mean, this movie is mostly dialogue, which
Mm-hmm.
which is great. Honestly, I think a lot of that time is spent in the car with
Mm-hmm.
our main characters, and they're just talking. And sometimes it makes sense, and sometimes it doesn't. If you
Mm-hmm.
have the thought that this is just a normal conversation between two people, it goes from these very low lows to these weird awkward highs where it's like,
Mm-hmm.
why are we joking? What were we joking? You know what we were just talking
Right.
about? um, but yeah, at the end, I very much had felt a feeling that the whole movie was elevated, and I knew I needed to go back. And
Mm-hmm.
whether or not I watched it or listened to it, I'm glad I was able to kind of return to it to get like newly found context for the lines that were spoken, the things that we see. But now that we've said that, something I kind of decided on early on when it comes to talking about this, we should talk about
Mm-hmm.
what this is first,
Yeah.
and then just
Yeah.
kind of go through it. So, and you can chime in on interpretation because a lot of this is interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
But from everything that I understand, so the young woman
Mm-hmm.
is not the main character of this movie. The main character is Jake,
Mm-hmm.
played by Jesse Plemons, which is funny because he's a character I mostly know from comedies. So,
Yeah. Yeah. That first time I saw him was in that Black Mirror episode
oh,
where it was like the
I
Star
haven't
Trek
seen
one.
that.
Yeah. So it's interesting to see him in this.
Yeah, I saw him in Date
Mhm.
Night.
Oh my gosh. Yes, you're right.
Yeah, and it's funny they also talk very in a similar kind of fashion.
Yeah.
So this is, as I understand, the kind of inner workings of Jake's mind
Mm-hmm.
before he commits suicide, and
Right.
and the young woman is kind of the woman he fantasizes about, who he's seen once in his life,
Mm-hmm.
but never really made a move or did anything. And so this is what it may have been like if a woman came along and gave a little bit of a purpose or meaning to his life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, and everything is kind of just the scrambled imaginings
Yes.
of what that may have been like if this woman was inserted into various moments in his life. It's like when you kind of we all fantasized before, and like they're never concise. They're never like a
Mm-hmm.
concise fantasy where it goes from point A, B, and C. They're usually
Yes.
all over the place. There's one
Yeah.
through line that's a part of the fantasy, but your head is interjecting all sorts of stuff based on what's going on. And so as I kind of sense it, we flash back and forth between the fantasy and what's actually happening in
Mm-hmm.
Jake's life as he's old. He's working he's a janitor at a high school, which I imagine for several years. And
Mm-hmm.
this is his fantasy as he goes throughout his last day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, that
Yeah.
is very upsetting. And yeah, the line "I'm thinking of ending things" is in fact a double entendre. How he is thinking
Mm-hmm.
of ending his own life, but also it's like the fantasy woman who is in his mind. It's like it's sad because even his fantasy girl's thinking of rejecting him as well. He can't even
Yeah.
accept himself that much to the point where it's like this isn't a happy thing. This is something where even this person wants to get out of my life.
Oh, yeah. And it's just, gosh, it's so sad to see. Um, Even through his mannerisms too. His like he's one way in the car ride. He's one way at his parents' house. He's a completely different way at the next set piece, which was at like this faux Dairy Queen. So like his standoffishness, his like emotional detachment, his frustration with his parents interacting with the young woman in a way that maybe makes him feel uncomfortable. Yeah, yeah. So, and like you say the word fantasy, and I think with fantasy comes this idea that everything is beautiful and perfect, and it's the perfect relationship in
Yeah.
utopia. But you're right, even in his mind, there are flaws. There are missteps. There are embarrassing moments. Um, and even a shot, I think, later on that leads us to believe that he's done this so many times. Like I think in the third act of the movie, they go out and get ice cream. Um, and they wind up at the high school where she throws away the cup of the ice cream
Hmm.
in a dumpster full of the same cup, hundreds of
Oh
them.
wow! I was gonna get to that because I'm like, what was with the different cups?
Yes. And I'm
That's
like,
okay.
so he's thought through this so many times. He's done this so many times, just playing it over and over in his head. And it's just disheartening. It's upsetting to see that this old man, who, as a janitor, I believe the high school that he went to, um, like this is what he's doing. And I think there's reasons behind that, which we can get into later.
Yeah.
But yeah. Hmm.
Okay, so with that context, let's go ahead and let's just do it. Okay, so this movie is actually now, once you've kind of established all of that, it kind of makes itself easy to talk about because it
Hmm.
has it's a port. You can cut it up in like probably about four portions, and you're like,
Hmm.
okay, driving there,
Yep.
parents, Dairy
Hmm.
Queen, driving to the school, and the school or whatever,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
probably more than four portions. But still, there's very few, like, as you would say, set pieces where you
Hmm.
know they're not going all over the place. So the drive there, it as you said, there's some things that like cue you in as to something's off. The fact that he's like interrupting her thoughts, you know, and stuff
Hmm.
like that, and like kind of seems like he hears them. But other than that, you could almost watch that car ride there, other than a few moments, and pretty much think that this is might be a straightforward story. What do you think about that? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, mostly. There was two moments where I felt like, okay, this is a little bit odd. Like from the relationship perspective of like, um, okay, both of them, he knew so much about her field of work, like
Mm-hmm.
could. And I'm not, I to the person who is able to do that to their spouse, that's fantastic. But this was like some really heady, high level science talk, and he was talking about it like he also does what she does. So much so that she comments on it in her head, like, Jake knows a lot about what I do, or something like that. And he's really interested, and that's great.
They take
Um,
a lot of time talking about her professions,
yes.
and
Yes.
little to no time on what Jake does.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
and I think there's a line that kind of talks about that as the saying like, "Oh, I'm successful," and that's like that validates you to be with someone who is successful, or something like that. There's a lot
Mm,
of that goes into it. That
it is so true. The other part, and I'm not sure if it happens in this car ride or the second one, but there was a moment where I felt like, and okay, so let me backpedal a little bit. We keep saying the young woman. She has a name in the movie. She
hmm
has several, actually,
several,
which is
yeah.
another point. So she starts off as Lucy,
Hmm.
and then I think Jake's parents call her Lucia. Like, and no one acknowledges this. So I'm sitting there and I'm pausing. I'm like, wait a minute, am I hearing that right? Wasn't her name Lucy?
Yeah.
And that's when I went to IMDb. I'm like, what is happening? And then they call her a different name, like Louisa, later
Hmm.
on. I'm like, this is so crazy. Anyway, in the car ride, the first one, I'm not sure if it's the first one or the second car ride. I swear that Lucy starts to do voices when she utters her lines.
That is the second time
The second
when
time.
she is giving her like this like dissertation or like this
Hmm.
critical analysis of a woman under the influence, and she
Yes.
goes into this like she almost sounds like more refined and
Yep.
almost like this
1920s. Like,
yes, it does. It's and I'm like, wow, this is a different performance.
yes.
And there's a reason for that, and
Yeah. Yeah.
it's on
So,
shuffle, you know. Basically this is a
hmm
fantasy on shuffle, which is often
a
how
great
it
way to
is. We're
put it.
like, okay, well, maybe she's like that, or maybe she's like this.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would work for my life, but maybe, no, maybe that, you know.
Yeah. That is, gosh, that's such a great description. But to your first question, no. Like, it just seems like the average car ride of, going to meet parents, in a blizzard,
Yeah.
and the girlfriend thinking about it wanting to be over, wanting the relationship to be over.
Yeah, and once you do, like, going back and realizing what those words mean, a lot of the times, like,
Hmm.
I'm thinking of ending things. I don't know when that thought came into my mind or when it started, but it feels like maybe it
Yeah.
was always there. I'm just like,
Yeah.
oh God,
Right.
this.
Yeah. Well, and a friend of mine read the book, and I believe he said that the book is very different because it cuts between that and also a couple or two people stumbling on the janitor who killed himself, and it's like really
Oh,
grotesque.
okay.
And I think they come across a journal which explains all of this, and maybe some admittance to some sort of thing that act that he committed that we'll talk about later.
No.
Um, so yeah, so I think for the movie's perspective, if we would have learned that early on, it would have completely changed like the sort of third act reveal of
Yeah, you
like,
kind of
oh,
just
this
know,
is
right?
you're right, the whole time. So it's very different.
Yeah, no kidding. And yeah, the only few things that are strange, she recites a poem, and she
Mm,
breaks the fourth wall and looks straight into the camera.
right.
Um, I assume it's a poem that Jake knows, and he's
Hmm.
something he's relating because it's very depressing. It's about depression, coming home,
Hmm.
and it's just not the same, and it sucks, and it's awful, and just everything that's supposed to be comfort to you is awful.
Yes. Yes.
um, and yeah, yikes. And they notices the swing set, that like
Mm,
that new swing set that's in front of the old burnt down
yes,
house.
that's right. I had completely forgotten about that. Yeah, that's pretty early on.
Yeah, so just a few things to hint you in as something's different, something's off,
Hmm.
and then ta-da!
Yes. Yeah, and I mean, like, and so they don't rip the band-aid off once they get to his parents' house, but they increase the amount of odd things that happen.
Yeah.
Um, and uh, I was talking to someone, and they were like, "Yeah, it's kind of like Hereditary without getting to the point where you're completely horrified."
Tony
Uh,
Collette, she can't escape
yes,
Hereditary.
I know, right?
But you
But
get
it's
that feeling, right, when
you
she's at
get
the
that
window
feeling. Yes, just standing
with
there,
that
or
creepy
even
wave.
like Get Out. It's sort of that like when somebody laughs just a little bit too long or
Yes,
holds a stare just a little bit too long.
there's so much of that here.
So much of that oddness of like, well, maybe they're just old or maybe they're just weird. So yeah, it's just one of those like I feel if I were her in that situation, I would feel really uncomfortable.
Oh, holy, oh, 100%.
Yeah.
You're brought to this barn where all
Yes.
sorts of awful things are happening. All
Hmm.
right, so I mean, we could talk about the barn scene. It's a very short. All that really happens is they just talk about how life is hard on the farm and the
Hmm.
story of the pig
Hmm.
who is filled with maggots, which
Yep.
ends up he ends up using it as a like an allegory for his own life, which is
Hmm.
awful. Sometimes you're just a
Yes.
pig getting eaten alive by maggots. That's
Ugh,
very
yeah.
gross. And dead sheep on the dead lambs on the ground or goats.
Hmm.
It's just what do you make of that? The fact that we go into the barn for this brief moment where he's like, no, I want this fantasy to
Mm.
move into to like blend with my parents. Do I want that? Let's go to the barn.
Yeah,
Oh, that sucks too. Let's get.
it was well, and it was interesting to even get there because the car ride has got to be what, like 25 minutes
Yeah,
of
I actually
yeah.
looked. First time I
Oh,
saw it, I
okay.
actually looked at the time. I was like, how long was that car ride? Oh, it was
Yeah,
like 20 something minutes. Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, that's what it felt like. So, and she's really she's it's a blizzard. She needs to get home that evening to finish some work. And he's really excited about her meeting his family.
Mm.
As soon as they get there, though, he doesn't want to go inside. And I'm like, what has changed from the car ride? Like it's a blizzard outside and he wants to take a walk. And she's saying, I'm freezing cold. Let's go inside. And
Yeah.
he's like, no, let's walk. And then they go over and see the barn and the animals. He was very matter of fact about it. Like, this is just life. Life. I think, like you said, his phrase was, "Life is tough on a farm," or "Life is hard on a farm."
Yeah.
Um, so to him, it just seemed like these are just things that happen. So no matter how grotesque or evil or bad they look to you, these are just things that happen.
Mm,
And so that was just really hard to hard to accept. Like
mm-hmm.
that's how what he believed.
Absolutely. In his
Mm.
fantasy, the young woman seemed very uncomfortable the entire
Yeah.
time. Just wanted to get out of there. So that reality just didn't really mesh with
Mm-hmm.
the fantasy that he was trying to, give himself.
Yeah.
Um, I think at this point we should address, because we're gonna get into it. We're going inside the phone
Mm-hmm.
calls that
Yes.
she is being rung, which I didn't notice this my first watch, that it's herself that's calling her. The names that
Mm-hmm.
they're giving her is actually calling her, and she will actually answer the phone at a certain point inside the house. Did you make out what is being said there?
No, I didn't. I meant to look that up. Did you look that up?
Yes.
Okay.
It's very strange. It's like only one question left. And I don't even think it was uttered in the movie after listening for it the second time, but in the book
Hmm.
apparently it's what are you waiting for?
Oh wow. Yeah, that's very much pointed, more pointed in the book. Yeah.
Um but yeah, we get into the house and meet Tony Collette and the father, which I
Mm-hmm.
will just call Professor Lupin from Harry Potter.
Yes. Oh my gosh, it was so great to see Remus again.
I know, exactly. Remus, my old friend.
Yeah, so yeah, and such odd it's such an odd pairing, but it just meshed like, you know what? I would believe it if they were together.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
they work. She's being extremely bubbly the whole time. It's
Yes.
the doting kind of mother, I guess. Just and he's just kind of he's not like as bad as you'd think when
Mm-hmm.
he's like just there's fathers in movies and in literature and real life obviously that are just blatantly disapproving and just
Mm-hmm.
you're never good enough, but his is a more subtle approach where he's not
Mm-hmm.
really saying it. He's asking questions that kind of draw out the fault. I mean, they have dinner together, and most
Mm-hmm.
of it's focused on her, and like that kind of comes out when he's talking about the her art, which
Yeah.
we'll find later is actually his art.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I imagine like projecting all these wonderful things on her becomes like, crap. I'm actually it's a
Yes.
reflection of my own follies and downfalls and
Mm-hmm.
my inadequacies.
My parents don't appreciate my art. Yeah. Yeah. And it's again, like it's one thing without the context of what's really happening to watch that scene and be like, man, this dad is being really hard on this guy's
Yeah.
girlfriend. And also the guy is just being really quiet and, you know, uh, not saying anything right now. This is really weird to watch. I feel uncomfortable. So yeah, it was just odd. But now having that context of like, okay, this is playing in Jake's head.
Mm.
This is how he feels about how his dad feels about his art. Man, that hurts.
Yeah. Really
Yeah,
sucks.
it's
And
just yeah.
why do you think he was so quiet during these scenes?
Oh gosh, I think that it was just a life of him being introverted, introspective, and like, maybe shut down by his parents. We talked earlier about the weirdness increasing at his house and like the timeline not being
Yes.
different. Um, and like there are some things that are odd, like okay, the dog comes in and shakes off from being wet, but he shakes for like a full 20 seconds, and it's very
Yeah.
strange,
That's a
right?
weird moment because every now and then like you almost think because this woman does not exist. Her
Right.
and Jake are one of the same, but there's some times where she reacts to some of the
Hmm.
strangeness going on around her as if she was a real person injected into this mind or something
Yes.
like that. I don't know. It's strange how she's looking at the dog when he's doing that, like, huh?
Yes.
That is kind of strange. I don't really know what to make of that.
Well, and even some of the other oddities that happen that are a little bit more strange of for example, I never forget the dad's name, but Jake's dad coming out of the kitchen and he looks about like 30 years older than he did just
Yeah.
a scene ago.
I'm looking at
Um,
IMDb. They are not named,
mhm.
apparently.
Not named. Okay. So just
Father
his
and mother.
parents, father and mother. Um, so yeah, like back to your question of him, like why I don't know. I just felt like there's always been that tension. I think about the mother getting what was it, the Genus edition wrong. She called it
Oh
the
my gosh.
Genius, and there was that back and forth of like, no, mom, it's the Genus edition, and she's like, oh, I thought it was Genius all this time, and
She's
he
so
was so
funny
ups.
here.
Yes, so such an enjoyable character, and I'm like,
Yeah.
man, there's such tension there that you can tell has been like that for years. Like this did not just start at this dinner.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm.
At the dinner table, I think we should bring up the story, because this
Mm-hmm.
is going to be important later, and kind of for the reveal at the end, the fact of how they met, and like I guess all of this is
Yes.
just kind of made up.
Yes.
There is okay, so if you want to ever hear the funny version of this, there is a in an episode of Flight of the Conchords.
Mm-hmm.
There is an episode where he comes home and sings this big long song to Jermaine about this girl that he met and he went on all these crazy adventures with, and she was, and then at the end
No
of the song
way.
he's like, oh, so this is about a girl you met. You're like, no, I saw her. I thought about talking to her, but I didn't.
Oh man. Oh, that's
So that's the
crazy.
funny version of this
Wow.
scenario.
And I think that just brings back to the point of relatable of like, man, I don't want to say all, but many of us have been there. And this isn't my scene, but like, hey, at a bar or trivia night or out somewhere, and you see someone across the room, and then, like you said, start to fantasize. And I
Yeah.
think Jake is the type of person who has just took it way too far. And granted, after a lifetime of disappointment and sadness and being made fun of at his work by the students at the school, he just takes it too far. And we see that too far in the form of this film.
Mm, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so do I understand that he never spoke to her at this meeting, which is it
Mm-hmm.
ends up in the story being like, oh, he talked to me and he was nerdy, but he was charming and I liked
Mm-hmm.
him and he was trying too hard, but it was cute. You know, it was one of those
Yep.
things where it's like, oh, and that girl will see all my quirks and my weird stuff and she'll like it. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes,
And
it was very,
yeah.
very, very interesting. Because, and I think up to this point, Lucy, she really didn't want to be there. She's been wanting to break up with him. She didn't want
Yeah.
to go on the car ride. She didn't want to go on the walk. She's been saying, I need to get home. But yet she's still the one to tell that story and do so in a positive way. I'm like, man, this girlfriend is really putting her A game on at his parents' house.
Yeah.
And Jake, you're not doing anything right now, buddy. Come on.
Yeah, he's being very rude and just kind of not saying anything,
Hmm.
and she's being very polite to his parents.
Very, yes.
So, okay, a few things of note. There's a basement. It's all
Hmm.
taped up. It's scratched up.
Scratched on the door. Another odd thing. Yep.
It's just like when she eventually. I mean, we're not quite there yet, but when she does eventually go in there, it's like
Hmm.
what? There's like his janitor clothes, right?
Oh gosh, yeah. And his art by the
Hmm.
furnace.
With his name on it. Yeah,
Yeah.
same art that she
Which
showed them.
I've learned in the book, the basement was a lot more ominous,
Hmm.
and the art was a lot more disturbing. So I think
Ooh.
what we see is a little bit different. But yeah, taped up, scratches on it. And I don't know, maybe you have a perspective on what that means, why it's taped and scratched up. Maybe that's just like a mental representation of what's closed behind there.
Yeah, the scratches not so much. I don't really get why there'd be
Mm,
scratches on the outside. That says to me that's when something scratches on the outside, that's like, oh, you want to go in.
right.
But there's
Yeah.
also tape that's preventing you from going in. And so like
Right.
I thought that like, okay, she just you I don't want my cruel reality to be like seen by my fantasy girl. Like what would she think
Yeah.
of the fact that I'm just a janitor or the fact that I'm a failed
Mhm.
artist or whatever the case may be, and just doesn't want her to be down there. Is that
It's
it?
great. Yeah, that's great insight. Yeah, I think that's spot on.
Me. But yeah, I mean, at this point, we get like the loopy. I mean, it was already the case when she goes to the basement, but we didn't really
Hmm.
talk about when she goes and they talk in the room and interesting things here. Okay, so a
Hmm.
few things I want to bring up. Okay, we get the phone call and their
Hmm.
parents are talking. They seem like they're just miserable, like they're seem kind of happy, but when they start talking, it's like, yeah, Life's terrible, isn't it, honey? Yeah,
Yes.
it sure is, honey. And then like she's talking about her tinnitus,
Mm-hmm.
which she calls she calls them the whispers.
Mm.
And so tinnitus obviously being a real thing that has nothing to do with mental illness, but in very rare cases can cause mental illness.
Mm.
So I'm curious about if there's something that runs in Jake's family, possibly. Not saying that that's the reason, but it just there's a few things here that maybe would lend credence to that interpretation. The fact that she's like, oh, they tell me things, whispers. A lot of people with tinnitus, they don't talk about their tinnitus in a way like that.
Oh yeah.
It's just a normal thing.
Yeah. That. Oh gosh. That. And it was just hard to see. And hard to see that she was actually going through that, but also that she was willing to just be so open about it. In front of someone she just met. But like sort of laugh it off, kind of. But yeah, that was just another one of those things. Like, man, I'm so glad I'm not her right now. Meeting this person's parents. This is so weird.
Genuinely funny line from her, it's like life's one great trip to hell. And she's like, Mom, oh, sorry. Yes. One-way trip to heck.
Yes.
That was pretty funny, actually.
The parents bring so much crazy, interesting pieces of acting into that house scene, which because the flow of the house scene is hard. It's just really interesting. I felt like I was trying to listen, because like you said, this movie is so dialogue heavy, so I am hanging on every word that they're saying because I don't want to feel like I missed anything, but also my brain is trying to keep up of like what just happened, why are they in a different room, why are they dressed differently, why do they look older, and not like, oh, this person looks older, but like the mom at one point is laughing on the stairs as she comes down to meet Lucy, but in one scene just shortly after, she's near on her deathbed with Jake sitting next to her, tubes coming out of her, and I'm like, what is happening? What am I missing? What did they say in that last scene that I didn't catch? How can I catch up? But it was also the most interesting because Lucy is just taking it all in stride. Yes, she wants to leave, but she's not like screaming, running out of the house.
Yeah, and there's this weird thing that's always brought up, like she's worried about not being able to leave because there's a blizzard outside, and Jake's keeping on the chains. He kept bringing up the tire chains.
Tire chains.
I half expected that to be like the way. I was like, is that going to be the way he ends it? No.
No. Yeah, too grotesque. And I think the way that he goes out, which we can get to the ending later, it made the most sense the way that it was portrayed. Almost this sort of classy, I don't want to call it classy, but the way that it was portrayed was
not gratuitous.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, so that was interesting.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, at this point, like, what's to discuss here? I mean, there's a lot in every frame, almost something to discuss. But with this podcast, I guess can't be 3 hours long. The father has dementia. I mean, clearly later in life has dementia. When I was watching this first time, by the way, there was a line that's spoken. I was literally like, is there going to be a sci-fi twist? Is there like a time loop? Like yeah, I don't know why, but I was going there. So yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of some of the lines she was spoken. She comes across the poem that she recited before, which is just a regular poem. It was in Jake's room, so it's a poem that Jake knows that's written by someone else. Several movies. I watched this video. Shout out to David Chin. He does a podcast with Slash Filmcast. He pointed this out, that there's a basically a shot for shot, line for line, or whatever rendition of A Beautiful Mind, the speech from A Beautiful Mind that's actually in Jake's room. Just some of the media that Jake's watched, because I have a lot to say about like media, because they talk about it a lot, and I think that really is if there's any takeaways from this movie, that might be one.
Also another movie about a character who's brilliant but also has mental illness.
Yes. Nice.
Yeah, interesting.
Good catch. Yeah, I didn't even think of that. But yeah, I mean, through all this, after she goes to the basement, she sees Jake's mom,
Mm-hmm.
dying, and I guess that's what happened. We're seeing kind of like a flash forward to Jake's life. He never left, took care of his parents until they
Mm-hmm.
died.
Mm-hmm.
And like, there's a few lines saying like how she's like because she's injected into this moment. Oh, we might as well have my fantasy girl say something nice about this. Like, oh, it's so nice the way you take care of your mother, and he's like
Mm.
super appreciative of that. He's like, thank you. People don't notice the kind things you do, and
Mm.
yeah, and it's at that point I believe is when they peace out, right? After a few strange interactions.
Yes, yes. And I can't remember if it was like a pleasant, like, okay, we're leaving now, or more of a, like, we need to get out of here now. Take me home. I don't remember how that transition happens, but I just know that it happens. Like, okay, we're in the car again.
It was
We're
kind of like a
headed back.
cut to, you know what I mean?
Cut.
It's like
Okay, gotcha.
so in a way, not cut to like we're driving off, but there was no like that she hugs the father
Mm.
farewell,
Mm-hmm.
and then they're just kind of getting ready to go.
Mm-hmm.
So there's
Yeah.
no
Okay.
like now we're leaving moment. They're just going, and
Yeah.
and there is that weird throughout all of it. There's like it's not scary. Again, none of it's scary. When a director's trying to scare you, and that's not
Yes.
any sort of intention that's going on there, but there is still like a horror movie vibe where the
Mm-hmm.
people that you knew a second ago are now acting strangely. Jake
Mm.
was in this room one moment, I turn around, he's in the next the other, and he's acting completely different.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's weird because you're actually like, as the viewer, I'm like, oh, thank God. When we were out of there, I was kind of with her. I'm like, yeah, you got to get to work. You got
Yeah.
work in the morning.
Yeah, it's getting late. And I mean, you gave him so many warnings, so why is he keeping you here?
Yeah, and it's so strange, this movie, because of the way it is, the weather, and the choices that they make
Mm.
when they're driving. It's nothing,
Mm-hmm.
nothing. It's one of those things where it doesn't really give you any sense of place or anything
No.
like that until you get somewhere, and that's perfect.
Yeah, actually didn't notice that until the movie had ended, and like a couple days later, I'm thinking back to it. I'm like, were there other cars on the road? Like there was no
No.
traffic. I didn't see trees. It was just the swing set in that building.
Yep.
And I think that was, like you said, it was so purposeful because it's so dialogue heavy. All of those other things would have been distracting.
And it's like the recesses of your mind. When you're thinking of
Hmm.
things, you don't draw those things.
Yeah.
You're just thinking of where was point A and point B, and the internal dialogue that's going on. You're not saying, and then there was a car that drove by and we passed some trees and there was a few houses. No, it's just, okay,
Yes.
we were driving and we're talking. The focus is on the
Hmm.
person who's next to you. And so like that's how a lot of times dreams work, when
Mm.
you just kind of go to one place and you go to the next. You're not really thinking of the in between. Um
Especially when it's your own house.
yeah.
I've done that drive so many times. Yeah.
Oh, definitely. And
Hmm.
yeah, I mean, a lot of conversation here. Obviously, just a lot of dialogue. Anything that stuck out to you
For the second car ride.
for the second car ride on the way to the? Because there's not much a car dialogue after we get to our faux Dairy Queen, but on their way
Right.
there seems to be a good deal of it.
Yeah, I think so. I think there are moments that, like, okay, we're going home. But then you realize we're not going home. Like, okay, we're going to a different location. Like you said, the faux Dairy Queen. I don't know if this was the first car ride or the second one, but Jake says something like, they were talking about plays, but I know Oklahoma, they do it every few years. And she's like, wait, who does what every few years? And Jake says, like, I see the kids who were in past productions at the supermarket or working in stores in town. And in that moment, I'm like, okay, he's the janitor. Like,
Yes.
I don't know why that connection didn't click for me in the beginning. Because it was just like this random insertion of this older gentleman,
Mm-hmm.
who I think in the beginning is staring out the window before she gets into the car,
Yep. He's just getting ready to go to work.
getting ready to go to work. We like on the way to the parents' house or before they get to the parents' house, they cut to the janitor cleaning the building. They cut to the janitor eating dinner, I think, in one of the classrooms, watching this rom com of a movie, sort of.
Mm-hmm. A sad touch with that. Speaking of cutting to the janitor, one of them
Mm-hmm.
is on his way to work. He's trying religion. He's listening to
Yes.
gospel, and he's just trying everything to kind of
Trying.
try to grasp onto hope, but it's not
Yeah.
happening for him. Very sad.
So I got these inclinations of like, man, is that Jake? But if that is Jake, why? Like I'm not understanding the timeline.
Yeah.
Um, and so when he talked about that, I'm like, oh, okay, that's him. But if that's him, then that means there needs to be finality between Jake and Lucy young for me to understand why I'm getting Jake old. Where's
Hmm.
that finality going to happen, either at the Dairy Queen, the school, or back at home? So that I'm like, okay, now that's what I'm waiting for.
Yeah, my assumption was going to be the one that got away, and he's just
Oh, okay.
that was my assumption, and it was kind of like, oh, this is kind of how I remember the relationship until the reveal that comes later. That's kind of where my
Yes.
head was at, but yeah, a few things that pop up in the conversation. It's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of it, the internal dialogue, especially after at the second watch, you just notice like, yeah, this is internal dialogue. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he's talking about the platitudes that people tell him about how it's going to get better and God has a
Yeah.
plan, every cloud has a silver lining, and it never happens. And it's almost like every now and then, like as you said, the young woman changes roles, and I don't not just like characteristics, but almost like the
Yes.
role that she has in the conversation. Sometimes
Mm.
she's despondent, sometimes she's supportive, sometimes she's like his cheerleader. Not saying cheerleader like you're doing great, Jake, but almost like the
Mm-hmm.
cheering on his thoughts, almost like they're platitudes. Platitudes all is what she'd say. Almost like that was her role
Yes.
in that situation.
Yeah.
So disorienting and so strange. And then they're singing the song about the freaking that we'll get later. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of that. And before I gotta know what the name of that freaking place is. It had an actual like kind of fun title to
Oh,
it.
the fake Dairy
The
Queen.
fake Dairy Queen.
Yeah. Oh, I
Ah,
forget the name of it.
it was like
Yeah, but even like you said, had that sort of like black and white Betty Boop stylish cartoon commercial
yeah.
that showed it. So yeah, it was just so that took place on the second car ride.
Yes, the second
Okay.
car ride is when they were on their way to the Dairy Queen, or God, what's it called? That drives me crazy. I hate calling it just the fake Dairy Queen, even though that's what it apparently was originally supposed to be, but they just didn't
Right.
get the permission to actually do that. But anyways, when they finally get there, this is very surreal
Very. Yes.
because he's just like, oh, yeah, you go ahead, you go ahead. And he just kind of
Yes.
like sidles off back,
Like
kind
you've
of.
been saying you wanted ice cream this whole ride, and now now you don't want to walk up to the window and
Yeah,
order.
now there's this.
So weird. And to add to that weirdness, these two younger, attractive blonde women who are working don't even acknowledge or barely acknowledge Lucy, who's at the window, but are just
Yeah.
like gawking over Jake. And it was so weird. I'm like, okay, what's the history
Yeah, they're
here?
tee. Yeah.
Yes. Almost in a like making fun of sense. Like at first I'm like, wait, are they into him? And I'm like, wait, are they making fun of him?
Yeah.
So it was very odd.
Tulsi Town.
Tulsi Town, that's what it was. Yes. Yeah. Very strange. And like we talk about set pieces. And I couldn't imagine this movie costing a ton to make. And I don't know about the FX that were done in it, but like car, house, um, Dairy Queen or Tulsi Town High School, right? Those are the locations.
Yeah.
But when we get to Tulsi Town, it's like nighttime in the middle of nowhere and a blizzard. They're getting blizzards in a blizzard, which was also pretty funny to me.
Yeah, that's
But it was like
awful.
this standalone building in the middle of nowhere, and they're serving them like they've had customers all night. Like, oh, this is just the normal thing to do. Pitch black in the middle of nowhere.
Hmm.
We're working tonight.
A lot of ice cream places up north, when the winter comes,
Mhm.
they just close. They're just like,
Yeah,
we're just gonna
right.
close because why?
Right. What?
And
Yeah. Who's doing this? Who's buying it?
why would you do this?
But yeah, I know. Now, as someone who loves ice cream, I would appreciate if they stayed open. But I know for like business wise, I get it.
Yeah.
And then it gets a little bit stranger. Lucy's ordering, but then someone else you learn is working there. Someone else who's a little bit more normal looking, who's not blonde, and maybe doesn't have perfect symmetrical features, who's a little bit sad, starts taking her order and making the blizzards. And I don't know if they've gave these characters names, but that character goes into just sort of side eye looking at the other girls who are there just joking and not really working, um, and saying something about being pretty. And she says something like, there's a certain hardness that comes with a certain kind of pretty, and you don't have that. And she said, she talking to Lucy, like maybe they suffer too with being that pretty, but I don't know. And that sort of pain of like, oh man, these people are more attractive than I am. It seems like they just have everything handed to them. Everything comes easy, and maybe they suffer, but I have no idea if they do. Like, you're having this sort of existential conversation late at night, serving a blizzard to someone who you don't know. Yeah, it was just very weird, very odd.
Okay.
That in the
Yeah.
context of like a boyfriend and girlfriend getting ice cream made no sense, but in the context of like, okay, this guy who's thinking about ending things having those thoughts made a lot of sense.
That's Jake, right? That's
Yeah,
him
that's
inserting
him.
himself into that
Yes.
situation, and like that's his
Mm-hmm.
his girl form.
Yep.
They have like a similar scar, I believe, on like the
Mm.
elbow, and
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
so yeah, that's just him inserted into this. It's very strange, but yes, very
Yeah.
interesting, and it's a small stop we make here. We don't spend a lot of time at
Mm-hmm.
Tulsi Town, but very interesting. Varnish. They're
Varnish.
varnishing. That smell. What's that smell?
Yes. Yes. Yeah, I think you're right. In the back.
I
Yeah.
don't understand that.
Like I attributed that to like janitor cleaning materials.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh. Oh, that's what he's doing. That's what he's
Yeah.
doing in that time of the day or whatever when he's fantasizing. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So, and that's I literally just thought of that now. So, but I
Yeah, a
didn't
lot
think
of this
about
is off the dome.
Yeah. Yeah, so that smell just yeah, man, it's just it all connects. It's just so interesting to think about. Yeah.
God. Yeah.
It's been weeks since I've watched it and I'm like still learning more about it. That's exciting.
Yeah, the areas of where like reality interjects, I guess, into
Mhm.
his fantasy. Very, very crazy. And so we get to this point where they leave Tulsi Town and
Mhm.
they make their way towards the school just because he wants to throw away these cups. So let's
Yes.
talk about that. He
Yes.
is dead set on going, and he
Mhm.
wants to go, and she is like, no, what are we doing? And he keeps saying this, to like, oh, you think we should go? Like she's like saying, I think we should just go home. He's like, to the barn? No, to the city.
Mm.
So she's like wanting, like in the fantasy, they live in the city, but no, he
Yes.
just can't.
Yes.
This is reality pulling him back down to earth, I
Yes.
think, and towards our conclusion, obviously. But that's kind of what I make of that. I mean, what did you kind of gain from this whole
Yeah,
in
you're
stretch of
right.
road?
You are it's funny you say stretch of road. And earlier you said this wasn't a horror movie or there weren't moments that made it feel like he's gonna get her with the chains like you had talked about. Um, but there's a moment where they're driving on that stretch of road to the school, and she gets visibly upset. Like, Jacob, what are you doing? This isn't a road that even cars would go on to get to a school. Like, where are you taking me? Like, okay. And that moment, my heart's beating faster. I'm like, all right, what's
Yeah,
about to happen?
and he's
Why?
seeming more unhinged
Yes.
too. He's getting really upset about the cups. He's like, just the
Yes.
cups. I just
We have to get rid of them.
banging on the wheel, and she's like,
Yes.
jeez.
So, and then it's the reveal, the school. And I think even
Yeah.
she's surprised of like, oh, I was not expecting this to be here. And it's gorgeous in a
Yeah.
sense.
What?
Yeah, right. Gorgeous in a sense of like the Overlook Hotel
Yeah.
during winter, right? Like, yeah, it's beautiful, but I
Too
don't really want to
beautiful.
know. Yeah. Don't want to know what's going on in there.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, we get to the school. Still blizzarding out. Jake, what does he say? Something like, I know I can get rid of these. I know where there's a dumpster on the side of the building.
Yeah, there's a dumpster outside
Further,
the building. They have a
mhm,
brief conversation. I was curious about this. I keep going back to it in my head. This to talk about it's cold outside. Baby, it's cold outside. Is this
yes,
part of the just the rejection in his head? I imagine, I guess, and how he views romance and how he views women, and just an internal dialogue of that. I
yes.
don't know. I guess it's just more of
Well,
that.
and was that song on the radio? Is that why they were talking about it?
No, he references it because like
Oh yeah,
she's
yeah.
like, "Let's go," and he's like, "It's kind of nice, right? It's kind of nice out here," and
Mm-hmm.
he's like, "Baby, it's cold out." And she's like, "Did you just reference a rape song to me or
Yeah.
whatever?" And they
And
have
he's
a
like, "What?
discussion about it.
No, it's not."
Yeah,
Yeah. And
and
that's exactly what he was doing. I don't want to say a good chunk of the movie, but inadvertently at his parents' house, she kept saying, "Hey, it's blizzarding. I need to get back. I need to get work and get my work done." And he's like, "I've got the chains for the tires, or let's just eat, or let's just talk, or let me show you this." Sort of not wanting to let her leave.
yes,
It's kind of eerie. Yeah.
very much so. Um, but yeah, I mean, he throws away the cups and they comes back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it was actually he throws away the cups, comes back, and they have that conversation, and then we have this weirdness
Mm-hmm.
where all of a sudden it's like, "Ah!" And then you like see him
Yes.
looking through like a hole in the wall or something like that,
Mm.
and then he makes him freak out.
Yeah, so I'm trying to remember where that, or I guess when that scene took place between like them being at the school, her being in the car. I'm not
Yeah,
remembering.
because what happens is they get to the school, they have a
Okay.
brief conversation. He throws away the cups, comes back, and then they're talking. It's like, oh, isn't this nice? And they have a conversation. It's after the baby. It's cold outside, and then we see like the janitor's eye looking through
Mm.
a hole in the wall, and then she's like, no, no. Someone's looking at us. I don't like that.
Oh
That's
yes.
unacceptable. And he leaves.
Yes.
He just leaves her and goes
Just
off.
leaves.
And at that
Yes.
point, she's like, "Oh wow!" And then
What did you do? Yeah.
we get a line here of
Hmm.
that is very poignant. Is wow, how long does it take to catch hypothermia or whatever? It says like that's not a bad way to go.
Hmm. Yeah.
And so it's kind of obviously leading up to how he eventually
Mm-hmm.
does it himself. But yeah, I mean, I guess if any part in the book was a horror movie, it would be this part, you'd imagine.
Yes. Oh gosh, easily. It's sort of this um oddness to weirdness to this sort of descent into deranged madness, but still with this filter of it's still sort of a breakup movie, right?
Yeah.
And so it's a soft-handed blow with some heavy gloves on, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and I forgot to mention this. You know, we didn't really talk about the Zemeckis
Oh gosh.
movie very much, but we kind of everything kind of almost climaxes in a very fantastical way. You
Mm-hmm.
know, is a lot of talk in this movie about the movies we watch and the book that we read and the books
Mm-hmm.
that we read and how you can't really start to tell the difference between what we're just copying and when we actually begin, or where
Mm.
is it just the people we know or the movies we saw. And I think that plays a lot into what happens here in this ending. A lot of that is just fantasies just kind of colliding, and they almost like there's a crossroads between a reasonable fantasy and something you
Yeah.
might see in, I don't know, Oklahoma.
Yeah. Yes.
Even so
Yeah.
much that actresses change.
Yes. Yes. Oh man, that was so weird to see. But like it was a great carrot and stick of like, man, what in the world? Like what types of tricks are they playing on my brain right
Yes.
now? How am I going to continue to listen and hear and understand, but still play catch up? So yeah, it is. Gosh, this is a film that warrants a second watch with all of that context to see all of those pieces. Like I think the first time I'm like watching and listening and letting it wash over me, but the second watch I think will be more of like picking apart each line and trying to
Yeah.
understand the double meaning.
Which, yeah, I mean, here we get the reveal that, when
Mm-hmm.
she's actually kind of dreading the janitor. She's like
Yeah.
hiding from him, doesn't want to see him, and then we get as she finds him, he's like, "Oh, who are you looking for? Is he your boyfriend? Okay, what does he look like?" And
Mm.
then it's revealed that She is not really sure because this is a person that he made up that he saw once, maybe.
Yeah.
Who
Yeah.
knows? I don't
Who
know.
knows? Yeah.
It sucks because you don't really know if this is what she thought of him or not. This is, self-perceived. This is not like a truth being revealed, except the truth that's in his head.
Right. Well, and outside, and so for context, he goes and it's like, I don't like that person's looking. Leaves her in the car. She doesn't like that. She gets out of the car. The car is locked. She
Yeah.
can't get back in, so she's forced to go into the building. Runs into the janitor. She's actually like sitting on the floor, upset.
Yeah, she like hides from him because she sees him
Hides,
there, and she like
yes.
goes into like the doorway, and he just comes to her.
And so you had talked about her not knowing who Jake is or what he looks like. And if we think about like, okay, all of those Tulsi Town cups in the dumpster of Jake has had this vision or fantasy so many times, and also think about Lucy having different names, maybe she was just one of many of the women that he fantasized about taking home to his parents and getting a blizzard. So maybe we're just seeing the movie with Lucy in it, but maybe there's a movie with, a whole bunch of other women that looked differently that maybe he saw at trivia. I don't
Absolutely,
know.
that blows my mind. That you said that to me about the mini cups representing the many
Yeah.
fantasies and the many times that he's gone through this in his head, and this just happens to be the last time. That's oof.
Well, and that's my interpretation. That could also just mean like this is the janitor's routine of like, hey, maybe I'm gonna get my TV dinner and blizzard from Tulsi Town and throw it away in the dumpster when I'm done. Maybe that's it.
The real one actually looks like that. The janitor goes there. God, the janitor filled this trash can with all the Tulsi Town cups that are 75% full.
Yes, gosh. Yeah, oh, that's so I don't really understand why he didn't eat it or they didn't eat it, but
It's too sweet.
oh, that's right. That's right. It's too
It's
sweet.
just I always forget how sweet this is. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
too sweet.
You mentioned Robert Zemeckis. For those who don't know, this highly lauded director who worked with Spielberg a lot, has done some big movies like Forrest Gump, Back to the
Back to the
Future,
Future.
even like Tales from the Crypt back in the day.
Hilarious.
So there's a scene that we cut to the janitor, I think, eating his dinner at the school, and on like a TV cart, maybe.
He's like eating like a
Projector.
sandwich on. Yeah, he's one of those things you roll into the
Yeah, the TV
classroom.
cart. Yeah, old school. Watching this movie, this fake movie, with it just seems like sort of one of those Harry Met Sally type scenes. A woman working in a diner and a boyfriend, assuming boyfriend, coming in professing love to her to the point where um, it doesn't go well. She gets fired, and they're both talking about it sitting on the stoop outside of the diner. And then we get a black credit card that says directed by Robert Zemeckis.
Yeah.
And that's the point where I laughed out loud audibly. Like, what?
That's just funny. It's objectively
It's just
funny.
subjectively funny. Like, oh, of course he's watching a Zemeckis film. Probably seen it hundreds of times.
Yep.
But again, fantasizing about what that life would be to profess to someone, to, have that person reciprocate those feelings, even after that person lost her job, and just fantasize about what that relationship could be like.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, just hard to pill to swallow. Yeah.
100%. I mean, she says goodbye to the janitor at this point.
Mhm.
It's kind of something. There's something very sad about it. I don't know. There's like a
Yes.
sad, like the janitor doesn't have a lot of like acting to do in this, but he's actually doing a very good job in this line where he conveys sadness, just saying like, well, goodbye. Like saying goodbye to her.
Yeah.
Is what he's like really doing. And then like, she finds Jake, but they transform kind of into an idealized versions of themselves, both Hollywood and attractive like that in that way, and they have a choreographed dance,
A long one. Yeah.
long one. Apparently, this is also from Oklahoma. This dance sequence with the score and everything. And okay, so apparently in the book, this is like a chase scene where basically the janitor's actually coming after him.
I'm not sure. But I think that there's a certain point in the dance where the young man and the young woman are dancing together and they're obviously infatuated with each other, but then a younger janitor comes up and stabs the boy,
Yeah.
if I'm remembering correctly. And I think to me, that sort of allows us to believe that that's something that he did or at least wanted to do years
Hmm.
ago. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, I don't know if he like commits a murder in the book. He may have. I'm not sure. But yeah, it's just something that I was thinking about. Like, man, is would he really go as far as killing the boy so he could get the girl, or is this something that he's just violently fantasizing about?
It's a possibility, especially
Possibility.
like when we
Yeah.
get to the end here. I mean, that's so yeah. There could be some like insidious kind of past that this
Mm-hmm.
janitor has. And he's not. There's more to it than just being like sad and depressed. He might be have done. Maybe he's done something terrible. I don't know.
Yeah.
Because yeah, we don't really see anything else violent happening in the entire movie until up
Mm-hmm.
until this point. So it's either that, or maybe he's killing the that version of himself to be
Yeah.
drawn back to reality. I don't know, but at this point we go back to the car. I
Mm-hmm.
believe we go to the janitor's car,
Yep.
and this is where he does it. This is where he commits the act, and
Mm-hmm.
we get Tulsi Town.
Yes.
We get which is so strange. Uh,
So strange.
I mean, like I don't really understand that. Like, why is Tulsi Town here? And he's like, there's like the woman in the cartoon, like, come join us or whatever. I'm like,
Yeah. I
huh?
don't know. Maybe it's just like he remembered the jingle, or it was like a four stanza jingle that he remembered. He maybe it was just a point of happiness that he remembered as a kid. I mean, we
Mm-hmm.
saw how many cups were there.
Yeah,
Um, we saw the attractive women there. He yeah, he they even showed us the black and white cartoon, the full,
yeah.
version of what that song is about. So I don't know. There's some sort of attachment there.
So something nice, I guess, as he's kind of
Yeah,
going. There's
possibly.
some sort of, I guess, delirium that may set in when you go through hypothermia. Um,
True. Yeah.
and yeah, then we get the pig, the rotting pig.
So, and so for some context, so he's in his truck right now,
Yeah.
right? But he also then starts to strip down naked completely,
Yes.
right? And so at that point, he steps out of the car. It's still blizzarding,
Mm-hmm.
and he's walking towards the school where this starts to happen, if I'm remembering.
Yeah. I am taking it that he never
Never
left the
left the
car,
car.
and all of
Gotcha.
this is in his head as he's being
Mm-hmm.
ushered into death.
Right. Okay.
So he's having a conversation with a pig again. That awful line, like, "Hey, it's not your fault. Someone's got to be a pig full of maggots." You're just like,
Yeah.
"Jeez, it's got to be you."
Yeah.
And then we get the scene where it's like two movie references, or one's a movie
Mm-hmm.
reference, one's a Broadway
Mm-hmm.
reference and performance.
Yes, and performance. Yeah.
Interesting though. Everyone has like hilariously bad old people makeup, and obviously that's not a budget issue. It's the fact
No.
that it's purposeful. I don't know if it's supposed to represent like high school stage makeup.
Yes. Yeah. No, I'm so glad you said that. That was my favorite part of that scene, because Lucy's in the audience, and we have seen her face this entire movie, but yet they close up on her, and I'm like, why does it look like she has a pencil drawn? And I'm like, wait, that's just really bad old people makeup. Like, what are they doing?
Yeah.
What are they doing? What am I missing? And so that sort of realization, like you had said, that sort of high school level makeup crew to be able to accentuate features on youth that they haven't developed
Yeah.
yet was just really interesting, because it was such this odd mesh of, yeah, high school performance of Oklahoma, but everybody's dressed in like black tie Broadway attire,
Mm-hmm.
and he's on stage and this is his like final performance. He's lit very well. It's this final scene, and everybody is just loving everything that he says and are just completely infatuated with this final scene. Um, I, like, of course, we know now that's referencing like his final death, his going away. He sees himself in this final performance. But it was, just again, the cherry on top of the weirdness.
Is
And I
this
got,
Is there might be a few ways to interpret this. Like I don't really know why, but it's either like a celebration of the fact that he's doing it, the fact that everyone's like, "Yeah, you did it," and he's like, or is this maybe it's a moment of blame because I couldn't have done it without you. You know, basically it's that kind of deal where it's like you're the reason I'm doing this. Like it could be taken that way, or it could be just literally, yeah, I did it. Thank you, everyone, or whatever. You know, like seriously.
No, I think you're right, and probably the latter, because I think about his comments or like scenes of kids in the hallway laughing at him, and my gut is telling me that all of the people in the audience are those kids.
Those two girls are there. The one girl who at the Tulsi Town is there, so they are some of them at least.
In a dark, twisted, you are the reason why I'm doing this, look at me now type moment. Yeah, I think you're spot on.
Yeah. Ugh. And then the final scene really is the song, Lonely Room from Oklahoma is the song that's sung here. Okay, so this doesn't really have much to do with it, but is he singing this? Do you think that's him?
Oh, that's a good question.
I think it might be.
Maybe, yeah.
It could very well be. I was trying to, like, the second time, like, listening to it, I was, like, kind of trying to listen to his voice and, like, try to match it up. If not, they got someone really believable to do it, which actually, like, I think it's a pretty decent rendition of this song. But it's especially, like, the mix they have, making his voice super echoey. Song that's sung by the guy who didn't get the girl. In the movie, I mean the play, I should say. But very very sad. Just a really eerie kind of moment here. It's very, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's so weird because the whole song is sung straight except for one line where he said it's all a pack. He's like all a pack of lies, and he like does that. Weird. It's so strange. What a strange directorial choice, or if it was an actor's choice, I don't know. But I don't know. But that was crazy.
Yeah. Oh gosh, it's so weird to be laughing about a movie like this.
Yeah, I know exactly. Right. It's very, very, very serious subject matter, but it's weird. But that's honestly, that's kind of the tone of the movie. Like there's some stuff that is tongue in cheek that is here. This is by no means a comedy, but there are some things that are just zany in nature. You know what I mean? But they're representing very dark and very real things that occur. But it's all in the mind. I think there's like maybe in this movie we get like a full minute and a half of things that are really happening. Like with like, and that's just the janitor, sort of most of it until he gets out of that car. I think at least. I mean, because to me, when the song's over and it cuts back to that snowy car, I believe he's in there. That makes a lot more sense. Now that I think about it, because at first I'm like, well, did they find him in the school, sort of thing? But yeah, I think you're right. I think we spend so much time in the movie in the car. Why not end it in a car? Why not show that finality there? Yeah, that's crazy. Well,
hey, feel good movie of the year, huh?
Yeah, ta-da!
Yeah. Oh man, it's so interesting. I'm glad to be able to get it off my chest.
Get it all out, buddy.
Yeah, get it out of my head too, because it's weird. I don't find myself thinking about this type of subject material often, but when a movie is done this well, it's hard not to think about. And
you start thinking in terms of it. Like a lot of times when a movie sets such a strong tone, you start thinking in terms of that movie. Like I remember like going to the store like after watching it, and like there was like, and I was like contemplating happy 80s songs because they were playing in our grocery store, and I was like, how come they don't write songs like this? And like my inner monologue, like I was like, that sounds a lot like crap they're saying in the movie.
Oh man, it's so true.
I watched so after I saw this, I watched Dora the Explorer, the live action film. I watched Spies in Disguise.
Very nice palate cleansers.
You gotta just, kind of I don't suggest you take a ride on this and maybe like a Charlie Kaufman-a-thon. I don't really suggest such a thing. But that being said, oddly enough, like a few nights after, like maybe a week after actually, going to bed, I was trying to pick a movie to watch. And it was like, oh wow, it's been like literally like so long since I've seen Being John Malkovich. And I watched it. Yeah. I didn't even realize. I was like, this is freaking Charlie Kaufman until it got to the credits. I was like,
yeah, it is. Yeah. Mind bending in that way.
And a very sad ending.
Yeah. It's so true. I saw Eternal Sunshine in the theaters, and I think I was the only person that day that went to go see it in that theater. And I loved every flippin' second of it. I still do. I've watched it.
It's a great movie. So
I think Charlie knows. Gosh, I feel like he's got this secret book on understanding the difficult, awkward moments of relationships and is able to portray that. Well, and I think maybe Michel Gondry directed Eternal Sunshine. Maybe Charlie wrote it. I can't remember. But either way, this particular movie is my benchmark for 2020 in terms of quality of what cinema has been this year. I think it surprised me that it was, granted, a book adaptation, but Netflix original. Like, okay, Netflix, you really knocked it out of the park. And the friend that I referenced before who read the book is luckily enough to live in Atlanta, where they show some of these movies in theaters. So he got to see it in theaters.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
I'm like, wow, that's a really cool idea. And what type of experience would I have had in a theater maybe filled with other people who are also turning their heads like, what am I looking at? Yeah.
And all in a big 4:3 ratio, aspect ratio.
Yes. Oh, that's not done anymore. Yeah, that was so yeah.
Usually used in movies now these days to create a sense of surrealism. As
honest truth.
The Lighthouse, for instance.
Oh gosh, yeah, that's one I still need to watch.
Yeah.
But I am excited to do so.
Well, man, yeah, I'm with you with that. I highly recommend this especially if you've gotten through this whole spoiler cast.
Yes.
But I do, I hope people do go in fresh, because like I had a good experience with it. Going through what am I watching to get to the end, I think is probably the way to go. Like, and to kind of maybe revisit visit the movie with it, every element contextualize. And at the same time though, I wouldn't pour over this one. This is something I wouldn't pour over and like watch or anything like that, as this movie does not deliver any hope. There's maybe a few reasons in the movie. It doesn't really give many. I mean, other than the fact that he may have not been very proactive in his life, and he may have let kind of media live for him and kind of create this sense of what his life should be like, and building it up in his head instead of actually, maybe doing something. I mean, and not that he wasn't wronged at all, but there, in lieu of any sort of anything nice, because I was talking to my friend Luke. He was like, "Yeah, I don't think I want to watch that. I mean, there's no." It's I can go through hell as long as there's something at the end that like makes you feel okay, and that's 100% fine. And if you this is not that movie,
no,
and this is not. Oddly enough, though, it's strange to say. I've been thinking about this for a while, but this is a movie that is enjoyable.
Yeah.
Meaning that, like, the way it's presented, the subject matter is obviously not, but the way you absorb the information that's given to you and through the dialogue, that's obviously very well written. It is for some reason enjoyable to watch, and that's the strange thing about it too. It's not like misery. It's not like this is a miserable experience watching this. It's really not, which is.
Yeah, I mean, like, to me, it's like looking at a painted picture. I might not appreciate what's painted, but I can appreciate how it's painted.
Is it a landscape?
Yeah.
How am I supposed to feel sad if I can't see myself there?
Also, a great line from Professor Remus in the movie.
Ghost, am I?
Oh man. And like, okay, so to go back to that really quickly, can
Yeah,
you
please.
imagine going to your significant other's parents' place, showing them your work on your phone as you swipe through photos, and they just stare at you like, "Oh, this is it. This is all you have to offer me right now."
Absolutely. Yeah.
No,
Well, it's awful, awful, but
terrible.
some reason I've thought of that such things and being like,
Oh
hey, this is some
man.
of the stuff I've done. Oh, I'm sure some people like that sort of thing.
Ugh,
Stuff like that. It was like,
terrible.
ugh.
Gut punch, backhanded compliments. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that pretty much sums it all up.
Yep. Well, this was really great. Yeah, super excited to finally talk about this.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
great. I'm glad we were able to finally do this. For our next extraordinarily depressing work in video games, TV, and movies. We'll see you
Yes.
next time, Adam. I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
Whatever you want to do, man, let me know. I'd love
Yeah.
talking to you.
We'll pick a positive one next time.
Yeah, let's do Dora the Explorer. Just kidding. No, that's all right. It was fine, by the way. But
Yes.
anywho, till next time, thank you so much, man.
Thank you.
See ya.
See ya.